Okay, so welcome to the RDA podcast. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining us today, Ivan. If you wouldn't mind just giving a quick introduction to yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Ivan. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders at Kaikaku. Um, I'll let you, is that all you want to know? Or should
Yeah,
we
no,
go a
no,
bit more verbose?
fine. So if you could just start off by giving us a bit of background information
Yeah.
on Kaikaku, when it was founded, what you do.
Sure. So Kaikaku, what we do is we make robots for restaurants specifically. We've been going for a couple of years now. When we started, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. We just knew restaurants were a struggling industry, massively tech lagging. They barely had kiosks at that point. And we knew we wanted to do something with automation and robotics. And because we were a bunch of 23-year-old kids, we decided we needed to learn quickly. So we went about making our own restaurant and putting our own robots into it as fast as we could. So we did that about a year and a half ago. And since then, we've had a robot in our restaurant for almost that entire time. And that's really what we do at Kaikaku. We're making these robotics for restaurants, but with our own living laboratory. And that's how we sort of move quickly.
Okay, and how did the founding team come about? Was it a happy accident, or how do you?
It was a bit of a happy accident. So it wasn't just me in the early days. So Joseph, who's our CEO, sort of the original founder, came up with the idea wanting to solve the restaurant problem. I was at a robotics conference about a week before my final year master's thesis was due, just basically being a nerd looking at robots and stuff.
Yep.
And I got a cold LinkedIn message from him saying, "Do you want to join this company?" I thought, no, that looks dodgy. And then he happened to be, 5 minutes away from me in a Costa. So I went and had a chat with him. And in about 20 minutes, he convinced me not to go to Ocado, which is where I was going to head off to.
Okay,
And so I started about 2 weeks after that.
amazing.
And similar kind of stories with the other founding members kind of happened of Joseph convincing them not to do their sensible and normal trajectories and instead join this weird startup.
So it really was a happy accident rather than
Very much, yeah,
Okay, great.
completely.
And the name Keikaku, where does that come from? What's the?
Yeah, so you have a concept in engineering called Kaizen, which is pretty popular with big automakers, especially in Japan, like Toyota. And it means something like constant or gradual improvement.
Okay.
Sort of one of many reasons why Toyota became such a reliable and powerful car maker is just every day everyone was encouraged to just fix one thing or fix a few things, but consistently. And that's great for industries like cars, where that's been going on for hundreds of years. The way we see it, though, robotics in restaurants, no one's really solved it yet, or actually doing it. Been doing it for a long time, and so you need a radical change instead, and that's what Kaikaku means.
Okay. So you touched on it briefly, but just elaborate a little bit on how and why you started the business, and obviously I guess you consider yourself as a disruptor in the industry.
Sure.
So just elaborate about that and the journey that Keikaku has been on since its founding.
Yeah, sure. So Joseph is the one who can speak most to the pain that he felt as to why he wanted to start it. He could tell the story better than I can, but he grew up in his parents' own Chinese restaurant and worked in it from the age of sort of 5, having to like man the woks and things, cut vegetables after school and all this kind of stuff. And so he had a great hatred and a significant amount of trauma for restaurants and never wanted to do it again. And then after doing sort of a few other ventures and stuff, decided he wanted to come back and actually, if he could alleviate some of those issues with technology, then that would kind of be a full circle moment. My kind of perspective is I'd been hugely interested in robotics and technology and stuff for years. And sort of the experience I've had before working at Ocado and TTP, a technology consultancy, were really cool. But it felt like what we were doing was quite far away from where it was actually deployed.
Yeah.
I worked in an R&D team at Ocado, and really, really cool stuff, but it would never see the light of day. And if it did, it would be for 10 years later.
Yeah.
And that kind of bugged me. And there weren't, to me, it didn't seem like there were good reasons as to why we couldn't sort of just start doing stuff more quickly.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, Joseph's trauma of restaurants and my perspective of wanting to get stuff out really quickly, that kind of combined birthed this idea of creating this robotics company where we maybe don't listen to conventional and industrial wisdom about how you should engineer, and instead we just do stuff really quickly, break it in a controlled environment, and then learn from there.
Okay, great. So very much a very early startup in the true sense. So what
Yeah,
challenges have you had along the way? What plenty, I'm sure.
some. um, many challenges. I mean, for starters, opening a restaurant's really hard. Even if you ignore all the technology, getting a restaurant to a place of food safety, profitability, operations, just making sure stuff's in stock is such a pain. And at times a huge distraction. So that took a very long time.
Yeah.
But luckily we had some really good people who, to be fair, had never opened a restaurant before. And so for them to get there is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's been a huge pain. Certainly dealing with when you have a team of just 3 or 4 engineers actually supporting both a robot in a restaurant that's live, like a deployed product, as well as trying to work on new versions and maintain momentum is pretty challenging. You're stretched fairly thin. There's countless times where we were at our laptops working on new versions, doing CAD, maybe writing code, and then one of the restaurants or a manager comes through and says the robot's broken again,
Yeah.
and we've got to come out and fix it. And there's just like tug of war consistently between the previous one and the new one. So
Yeah. I think
that's been a big
that
challenge.
was evident from when the first time we came into your restaurant and there was nuts flying everywhere.
Yeah. Nothing's changed. And yeah. So
Okay, so you touched on your living lab, which
Yeah.
obviously we've been to visit a number of times, which kind of allows you to see, real customer feedback and data real time.
yeah,
So how does that feed back into your R&D or your product development?
sure. So what, another big feature of the engineering we do at Kaikaku is that we're vertically integrated, which basically means we try and do all of it. We don't just work on the software and buy off the shelf robots, or we don't just make the hardware and then outsource the software to consultancies. It's all in-house. And that allows us to get a really, really tight rate of iteration by doing that, and also having our living lab. So the iteration sort of development goes on multiple streams, mainly hardware and software. It's very common in software industries to be able to ship updates hourly or daily at worst. That's very rare in hardware. Normally your sort of iteration cycle might be in the space of weeks or months, enough time for new parts to come potentially from abroad.
Yeah.
That's a big part about what we do, about having this living lab, is we have lab at the front where we can put out our robot, maybe bring out a new component like a shaft, see if it works. Maybe we don't need to watch it, but we can go back. We've got lots of bits of software and stuff to monitor it. If it breaks, we can immediately find out why, design a new shaft, or maybe change slicer settings for 3D printers. And then downstairs in our basement, we can print another one. And so it's this kind of flow, this vertical integration flow of seeing the experiment in real time, designing the fix as it's breaking or just after it's broken, and then immediately getting it repaired and having it out before the end of the shift. That kind of flow is really why we have this living lab and
Yeah.
where the power comes from.
Incredibly reactive to what's going on in real time.
Yeah, hugely.
Okay, so obviously you've been going for how long now?
A couple of years.
Couple of years?
A couple of years, yeah.
And the robots, whose name is
So the robot's called Fusion.
Fusion.
We're on several generations in, so they all look a bit different, but Fusion.
Yeah. So are you able to kind of discuss any kind of future plans that you've got for Fusion, or what's
Sure.
coming in the near future?
Sure. So the one that you'll have seen when you've come, that internally, well, I think you've seen Fusion V2 and V3 and V3B and all this kind of stuff, which they kind of look like, for the sake of people who've not seen it, dispensers at like a Premier Inn, like cereal dispensers. Hopefully you'd agree it's a little more complicated,
bit
but it's
more,
not much more. That's kind of the point. It's meant to be super cheap. It's meant to be very simple. It's all hobbyist electronics and equipment. To make the robot extremely affordable. Restaurants don't have any money. If your robot isn't cheaper than a human, you're never going to be able to actually get them in.
Yeah.
So what we're doing now is we're making a new version, which I think you might have seen behind the scenes. And with any luck, potentially by the time this comes out, in the next couple of weeks, we'll bring that out into our store. It's predominantly the same. It still revolves around food assembly. Previous versions of Fusion, you put a bowl in one end, it would travel between stations one at a time and get filled up with different ingredients, and out it would come. This new one is meant to automate a lot more of that food assembly flow. So no humans required to start it off. There's a bowl dispenser, bowls drop down. They still move across and they still get filled up one at a time at stations. But now also liquids can get added to it.
Okay.
A little later down the road, we'll have hot holding, so you can have hot proteins and stuff like that.
Nice.
And out will rise, hopefully, a fully completed bowl that doesn't require any extra human involvement. So we're basically automating a lot more of the process.
Okay.
That's the general kind of philosophy: is take the most painful part, just automate that, wait till it works, wait till it's useful. The next most painful part, instead of trying to tackle it all at once.
Okay. So I guess the ultimate aim of Kaikaku and Fusion is to reduce the number of people and the interaction that's needed in order to prepare the food, the salads.
I wouldn't say entirely. If anything, somewhat the opposite. The overall aim is actually to not replace any humans, but allow humans to do a better job at what they're good at, which is
Right.
being human. It's really hard to make uncanny human robotics, humanoids and things. Is very popular these days. Humans are great at talking to people and dealing with that customer service aspect, but they often can't in especially quick service restaurants because they're rushed off their feet
Yeah.
making a coffee in the exact same way every time.
Yeah.
That's perfect for a robot to do, and hopefully will allow humans to deal with the bits that they're best at.
Okay.
So that's the overall goal. We're definitely not trying to make a vending machine. People have tried that, and I think it has its own place, maybe at things like airports.
Yeah.
But as we move into a more and more automated world, especially with the increasing rise of I would say it's already become extremely annoying whenever you try and go on a customer service live chat and you have to fight through the waves of AI filtering to get through to a human. In a similar way, a human element is going to become a premium.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to, maximize for that in future restaurants.
Okay. Good. And so, do you think automation will eventually become the default for food prep, or do you think it will remain a niche?
I think for certain types, it's going to have to become the default. I mean, already in factory and sort of large scale prepared food, that is the default. It's just not economically viable, or it's much more difficult. Obviously, in quick service restaurants, I think that's absolutely going to become the norm. There's just no way, especially with recent, changes to national insurance laws and stuff. Humans are really expensive. To rely entirely on humans just for the mundane task, I think is going to become impossible, and a lot of restaurants are going to struggle. Who knows where that's going to lead for sort of higher quality restaurants like fine dining? But it's something we've discussed a lot. Is that right now? High end restaurants are really expensive
Yeah.
because of the knowledge and skill of a chef. It would be nice, and there's one vision that we can potentially democratize that kind of skills,
Yep.
into and bring things like really really expensive steak and things like that down into lower price points so that more people can enjoy it.
Yep.
Something we recently released, which started basically as just a Friday afternoon project for fun, is our culinary AI Epicure. And that builds on some existing scientific work, and essentially can turn anyone just into a chef. You can pick a bunch of ingredients and it will use its sort of back end to figure out how they pair best together, what other ingredients you should pair them with, and generate recipes for you. So that's already taking one of the main skills from a sort of a high tier chef
Yep.
and bringing that to being available for everybody.
Interesting. Okay. Bit of a big question here, but where do you see the future of AI heading?
Sure. So I was thinking about that just as I came on. I mean, obviously, I'm extremely bullish on AI.
Yep.
We use it constantly. I don't really write much code anymore.
Mhm.
My computer or AI, Cursor writes code for me.
Yep.
And I just look at it and go, "Yep, looks good." And that's broadly true for everyone at Kaikaku. We use AI to generate loads of our marketing images, generate all of our I was about to say legal documents, but that's not quite true. That would be one step too far. But certainly review things and stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. I do have a slight feeling that we're approaching a bit of a bubble. Over the last 2 or 3 years, billions and billions of pounds of investment has gone into various kind of AI firms. Curse is a great example, which recently, I think it's the fastest growing company to 100 million ARR in history or something like that.
Okay.
That might not quite be true. but so much money has gone in, and they've managed to gain such a huge customer base by subsidizing expensive data centers and GPUs, and nowadays even small nuclear reactors to power all of this. At some point, people are going to demand profits,
Yeah.
and that's going to burst. And we'll see how that goes. Even at the moment, to be fair, tools like Cursor offer software engineering that is comparable to a human. Um, and so even if they have to start charging prices comparable to that, potentially it's not really going to go anywhere. I think
Yeah.
it just, a lot of the more niche and arguably silly use cases of AI might have to disappear.
Fair. Okay, good. All right, so moving on to R&D, specifically within Keikaku. So in the first instance, what made you look into claiming R&D?
Sure. I think actually I have a friend who's doing his own startup. And when he was doing a previous one called Clip Energy, he had heard from somebody that their entire survivability of their business was in the early years based on successful R&D claims.
Okay.
And we were going through a point last year where we had to sort of look after the cash outflow slightly. So that sort of prompted us to get on it and see what we could do. Actually, I think I first came across RDA when I did a DTO motorsport day
Right.
and met Aston,
Hmm.
who recommended you. And then yeah, one thing led to another, and that's how we started doing that. And now we're obviously going to continue doing that because it seems like a prudent way to save a bit of money.
Brilliant. Okay, good. And what would you say your R&D journey has looked like so far?
I think certainly in the early days, much with everything else at Kaikaku, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing.
Mm.
I'm sure you can certainly attest to
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And so there was a lot of probably just throwing information at you and Lee
yeah, yeah,
last year,
yeah.
and you probably having a big job of trying to actually find the useful stuff out of it. What we have at Kaikaku though is done is significant amounts of AI of R&D, really almost all of it. With this whole concept of living lab, even though we have a restaurant and it does serve customers and stuff, all of our development is predicated on this space.
Yeah.
And so really everything we've done since inception has been about, trying to solve this very uncertain challenge and broad challenge of, can you actually operate a restaurant with a robot? So everything we've done from even the early demo days we did before we actually had a restaurant has all been trying to answer this question. So yeah, lots of R&D, which I don't see going anywhere. I think even though we're going to start commercializing as a company and hopefully start paying back investors essentially, or actually generating some revenues, I don't see a significant amount of R&D going anywhere. We're nowhere near to solving this problem entirely.
Yeah, and I guess as fusion evolves, then obviously there's going to be new technological uncertainties and challenges that are going to come up that you need to resolve, right?
Hugely. And we're a very lean team at the moment, which is great, and that's why we sort of center around this flagship product of Fusion. But we completely see the future of restaurant automation as being full stack and again vertically integrated. If you want to maximize a restaurant, you don't just put some, one piece of AI analytics software on top of it. You need everything. You need, impressive sensors that can collect all this data. You need the automation to affect it. You do also need data analysis software to achieve that. And so when we do grow, I see a significant broadening of the products that we work on. We already work on multiple things as well. We make our own kiosks in-house.
Yeah.
We have computer vision that we operate in our store. All of the order tickers and stuff we also make in-house. We actually have software called Mosaic, which handles all robot and restaurant configurations and stuff. So there's a lot more than just Fusion, and all of that,
Yeah, yeah.
it's going to have to require more
Yeah, it goes far beyond
R&D
fusion.
thought in the future.
Okay, good. So, as a young startup business, how has claiming R&D benefited Keikaku?
Hugely, we got money. So I mean, it's definitely more than that. I would say in the early days, it was certainly motivated by, we got a nice rebate, which of course, the benefit's obvious. Beyond that, I'd say it actually made us become a lot more sensible about intellectual property. Certainly, what you guys made very clear was that R&D was just one part of a larger IP kind of strategy.
Yeah.
Something that, again, us as inexperienced children didn't appreciate at the time, or didn't realize, has since become very clear. It made us formalize a lot of what we were doing. certainly when you started with us, our documentation was a mess. We were barely writing anything down because we were moving really quickly and
Yeah.
just sort of rather than spend an hour writing it down and writing a little report, we could just
Nature.
go fix it and get on with it.
Yeah.
That now, however, doing an R&D claim has forced us to reevaluate that, and certainly, I think you said some point or alluded to the fact that when you don't write stuff down, you're essentially losing money that you've spent doing R&D. So it certainly made us grow up a little bit in terms of documentation and things like that. Beyond that, and sort of beyond just the R&D part with broader IP, certainly having you guys come in and be more experienced and sort of more knowledgeable in this space has been a very good wake-up call for some of our less serious aspects of what we do. The most obvious one is, locking doors, things like that, leaving things about the place, leaving tools or potential IP. So yeah, it's just basically, I'd say, made us grow up a little bit as well.
Okay. So you probably touched on this a little bit already, but what would you say the biggest learning curve in going through the R&D process has been for you for the first time?
I suppose, we had to learn some stuff about the process and some of the details about how the claim works and stuff.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I would say that there wasn't a huge learning curve because you dealt with almost all of it. We just had to talk for a few hours.
Yeah.
I think the main learning was that because we hadn't done our homework well in terms of keeping good records, we had to do a lot more talking and thinking about it on the spot rather than just being able to go, look, these are all the stuff. This is everything we did. Here you go. But other than that, it's been actually a super smooth process. We didn't really have to do anything.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on through your R&D journey, then, has your strategy evolved at Kaikaku as a result of kind of interaction with RDA?
Yeah, hugely. So, I've definitely already talked about the documentation and that culture of, making sure you write down your learnings and stuff. So that really helps evidence what we actually did that was going towards solving an unknown problem. Certainly with RDA, especially because we've for now a good few months been using your IP services as well. That has been a complete change. We had a very cowboy IP strategy before, or none actually. We had a couple of patents pending, but they were done at a time when we didn't really appreciate why we were doing them. It was very much a case of let's get a patent because that's what you do.
Yep.
And that caused countless headaches in hindsight when we had to come and deal with them later. And so, we've now got, with a lot of consultation with yourself and Alec as well, a lot more of a good idea on how we actually should evaluate how to protect stuff. Not always just a patent.
Yep.
And don't patent everything. What should we patent and how should we go about protecting something? If we have product X, we don't go and try and patent the whole thing, which is basically what we tried to do before, but instead patent one useful innovation. I also touched on our confidentiality.
Yep.
It's true right now that it wouldn't be super hard to break into our office. That will change. We are now moving into a new office in the next month or so, and you'll be pleased to hear that we'll have full access control, and it has frosted windows.
Brilliant.
No one's getting in.
Good to hear.
But yeah, that also was something that has made us change that as well. And also just looking at, I guess, an IP strategy beyond just patents. Certainly at university, when you have a brief professional engineering skills lecture and they talk about IP, it's just patents is all that's covered. So, now along with you guys, Alec did a freedom to operate study for us. We've recently registered a bunch of designs. I think we've done like 27 in total. So now it's a bit more comprehensive and not just focusing on one thing.
Yeah. And I think what was key for you guys was just understanding how that IP works for you better as a business, especially, when you're looking for investment and what information you can release prior to investment and post-investment. I think that was something that maybe you needed to be made aware of.
Yes, definitely. There was a lot of cases of showing stuff off on LinkedIn, perhaps prematurely.
Yeah. Okay, good. So do you have any kind of internal tools or methods that you use to track your R&D activities as you go through the year, so you're not scrambling about when it does come to talk to us?
It's pretty much just entirely Notion. We use Notion for all of our knowledge management and documentation. I think it's a great tool. We used Confluence before, thought it was rubbish. And yeah, so we basically, I think, rather than a tool, I think the main thing is just been trying to instill more of a culture of documentation. Yes, it's very, very good to scramble around and fix the problem quickly and learn quickly. And, definitely don't want anything to be bureaucratic and get in the way. But it's very much now a culture of, once that sort of has ebbed a little bit, make sure it's written down as soon as possible. Get the bare minimum required, that, whatever you did, what if it went well, what went well, so we know for next time, and especially if it didn't work,
Yeah.
so we don't repeat it. It's more just that culture, I'd say, is the main thing now.
Yeah, it certainly makes it a whole lot easier if you've got that information to hand rather than trying to think back over what happened over the course of the year.
Otherwise, we keep doing, an easy one actually, easy example occurred recently. One sort of niche part of the robot communication structure is the use of something called micro ROS. We tried this last year, tried to get it working for a few weeks, to not really any avail. It not, but we're perhaps not using it for quite the right use case. And we didn't really write down why it didn't work, and our learnings and experiments and stuff.
Yeah.
And then this year we tried it again, kind of thinking we'll give it another go, and it also didn't work. And we probably would have saved another week or so of pain if we had really clearly written it down.
Yeah.
And sort of thought about it.
It's sometimes counterintuitive because, as a business, you often want to forget about failures or things that don't work. But for R&D purposes, that's key information. That's great. It just shows that it wasn't easily overcome and was a real challenge. So
Yeah.
it's key to document that type of stuff. So having gone through the R&D process a couple of times now at Kaikaku, would you recommend other businesses to look at claiming R&D tax credits? And if so, why?
Yeah, 100%. It's basically free money. Why would you not?
As long
Especially
as you're doing R&D, right?
as long as you're doing R&D, of course. But if you are, especially if you get someone like yourselves, the process is insanely straightforward. I think in our first claim, actually, our most recent claim was even more straightforward. But even the more painful one, where we didn't have all of our stuff ready, I think we chatted for maybe 3 hours, and then probably had one more call later,
Yep.
and then a few emails back and forth, and that was it.
Yeah.
It's very little effort from our end, and you get, especially if you're spending a lot of money on R&D, if you're an R&D intensive business, you get quite a lot of money back. We didn't get as much as this, but certainly the example my friend gave of his friend's company, they were getting a couple million back in R&D a year, which is obviously significant.
Huge, yeah.
So yeah, 100%. I think
Okay.
it's just a no-brainer.
I think the process obviously gets easier once you've been through that difficult first time of trying to understand what's required, and gone through the process. And obviously the future years become all that easier.
I mean, our recent one we did this year, I think you came for an hour and a half, and
Yeah.
it hasn't even been anything since. Like, there's not been much follow-up. I mean,
Yeah. I
it's been
think
very
obviously for us as a business, it becomes easier because we have an understanding of your business, we have an understanding of what you're doing. So for us also, it becomes easier and that process becomes quicker as well. So
Yeah.
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 Okay. So you've touched on IP already. How would you say the IP strategy that you've now got differs from what you started with?
Well, we didn't have one, so it certainly differs a lot. No, so like a few of the things that are easy to talk about. Before, it was this case of, oh, we've done something, we should patent it, which in hindsight now doesn't quite make sense. What we now do is we have an IP register, or I sort of maintain one on Notion, just of all the things that seem interesting or inventive. And then, with some guidance from Alec in early days, talking through the different ways you can protect stuff, I basically now go and categorize what we might do with it. So if it's a sort of very clear mechanism in our robot and we think it's novel, etc., maybe that's going to be patented. If, however, it's sort of the way two things go together in their shape and form, maybe that's a design right. If it's, as with a lot of our things, some kind of algorithm, maybe it's just trade secret and we keep it quiet. So now we're sort of basically categorizing stuff and thinking through and sort of looking forward to what we might want to patent before we actually go down the process, instead of just reactively being like, okay, time to go, because it's insanely expensive once you've started.
And without an advisory company such as ourselves, what was your go-to if you had queries or questions around IP in the past?
I suppose we had, so actually in the past, so we now have a great advisor on our advisory board called Ed Shelton,
Okay.
who is head of new product development at Dyson, and has been involved in many patents, I think 50 plus. He's great, and he was super helpful, certainly in navigating us outside of a bit of a sticky situation before. But back in the day, before he had joined us, we didn't really have anyone to talk to. Um, Another learning that we have come across is you don't really want to talk to patent attorneys
Yeah,
because they'll take all your money.
exactly.
Even one email, which costs hundreds of pounds, and so you're kind of stuck in the water with no one sort of to talk to freely. What I've found especially is that patent attorneys are obviously great at their job at drafting patents and dealing with all of that, but it can be quite difficult to get a straight answer out of them
Yeah,
because they're being sensible and, and,
yeah,
and making sure they don't say anything that could later come back to bite them.
yeah,
But sometimes it's helpful to just be like, Alec, is this good or bad? And he can just say, yeah, it's fine,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
I think it's also fair to say that patent attorneys don't have an understanding or have an opinion, perhaps, on your IP strategy as a business, and what would best work for you or be
Yeah,
most beneficial for you as a business.
I think that's certainly true. And obviously the incentive structure of paying per hour definitely does not always align with what is best for a business.
Yeah, yeah, fair to say. So, what has your experience been like in protecting your IP, and have you had any challenges with this?
Yes.
Go on.
Well, okay. So I think the main challenge I haven't already spoken about is, we had this situation where we had a couple of patents, or a couple of applications related to our early versions of the robot. And again, we'd filed these in quite a rushed way to sort of get them out before a demo day. So we were still conscious of having to get your priority date in and things like that. But at that time, not much thought had gone into exactly what we were patenting. We hadn't really looked at the state of the art and the state of other patents and stuff like that as well. And we since had a difficult scenario where, through a variety of issues to do with internal and external communications, we missed the date for our PCT filing. And so that was one of the earliest things that we had to clear up when we started using your IP services was this disaster of trying to get through this patent that had already gone through its examination, search and examination report and had a lot of problems with it, and yet had missed its PCT date. And so we had to file a restitute, no, a restitution something.
Okay.
I'm sure Alec would know.
Yeah, yeah.
We essentially had to file an appeal saying we missed it by accident. And we did go through that process, and it was quite painful and also relatively expensive. But we're now out of the woods finally in the end, and we're in a good place now where we have quite recently, and with a lot of Alec's help, filed our most recent application, the first one since I became CTO and since we've sort of moved on from this different strategy. And that was extremely smooth. And so, yeah, luckily we're now out of the woods of having all this chaos to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the risk of being such a fast-moving startup such as yourselves is that you don't want to patent something that out improve in the near future,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
the patent becomes almost, no use at all.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's something that um, I'd say with our most recent patents, we're close to. It's something that, definitely goes back and forth thinking about each day. But then what's good about having someone like Alec is, he talks about, for example, the patent box scheme, where even if maybe marginally there would be a better approach to go down, now that we've got a patent, and if it does go in our robot and it does touch revenue, then we can claim that back later if we become part of the patent box scheme. So I guess that does go back to this thing you're saying, where having an advisor can align a lot more closely with your business's needs rather than just let's file some stuff and
Yeah, yeah.
make some money.
And how would you say the IP strategy that's been put in place since working with us has impacted your investment rounds?
I would say truthfully, only because we're still very early stage, it hasn't made a huge difference yet.
Okay.
Just because we're still at that stage where we're raising sort of seed round kind of timings. It's not generally expected to have a comprehensive strategy and stuff. So honestly, I don't think it's making or made a huge difference. For certain investors that are very savvy, and especially hardware related ones,
Yeah.
I think it's a reassuring sign that we're on top of it a
Yeah.
bit and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's something that I think it's just good to get started now, because as we probably quite quickly go from where we are to commercializing our robotics, that's when people are going to pay attention. And so, yeah, we can't really, in hindsight, do that due diligence. So it's good to get it ahead of time.
Okay. And what does your IP strategy look like for the future? Are you continuing to consider more patents, or what's the plan going forward?
Yeah, I think it's just to maintain one, having a sort of a register and sort of thinking about what we might be wanting to protect at all times, rather than just at a sort of moment of discovery or anything like that. And then keeping it general and broad, not just patents, but having this whole range. I think at some point we're definitely going to want to look into the patent box scheme. Obviously, our robot has been in the restaurant for over well, the most recent version has been there for about 11 months, but we've had a robot of some kind in there for much longer. And our restaurant, at peak was making $1 million a year in annualized revenue. So that's potentially a lot of money that we could recoup
Amazing.
with the patent box scheme.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's just going to be, luckily now that we've got a good foundation, it's going to be similar but more.
Okay, good. And then, looking to the future of Keikaku, what do you have in, what's coming down the line for you? Are you looking to expand in any way?
Yes. So I think we're definitely at a bit of an inflection point where we've spent the last year, hopefully moving away from being kids to being a little bit more sensible, moving away from robots that just, spill nuts all over the floor when you walk in, to ones that actually do serve people every day. We've a lot has changed in the last year, and I think it's been a bit of a, tuition kind of
Yeah.
experience. We are approaching the point, we're definitely not all the way there, but we're very much approaching the point where we're ready to commercialize. Obviously, our robot does actually serve real customers, but strictly speaking, we're not shipping them out as fast as we could. And without going into a lot of details, we are very much looking at how we're going to do that over the next year.
Yeah.
Our sort of base case, what was the original goal, was to self-operate, open lots of restaurants. That's still on the table, but I think we've moved away from it slightly because of how expensive it is and how much additional risk there is. I think what has become very in vogue at the moment in these kind of industries is like a roll up strategy, where we essentially have this platform that can hopefully turn struggling and distressed businesses into more profitable ones. And for better or for worse, certainly unfortunately for a lot of businesses in the UK, with recent tax changes, restaurants are hit especially hard, and there are a lot of struggling and distressed businesses that potentially, without any kind of input, will go under.
Yeah.
So I think that's certainly, yeah, without going into too many details, one way in which we're going to commercialize and expand is by trying to turn this headwind of tough times for restaurants into a tailwind for everyone combined.
Well, thank you for popping down. It's been great to talk to you today. And as I said, be interesting to see what the future holds for Keikaku, and look forward to continuing to work together.
Oh, thank you for inviting me and for all of your help with R&D and IP. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more of that in the future as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.